I don't know how likely it is that action is going to come down on this
Mhm.
issue, but I think that there's a possibility we could see some real positive change here.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome, everybody, to the Appraiser Coach Podcast. My name is Dustin Harris. I am the Appraiser Coach, and we are sponsored today by Spark for Appraisers. Spark for Appraisers is the ability for you to download information directly into your report, saving you time and saving you money. Again, go to sparkforappraisers.com, sparkforappraisers.com. And we are sponsored by WorkingRE Magazine. WorkingRE is the magazine that brings to you information about the industry that you have chosen to be a part of. Check them out by going to their website, free of charge, workingre.com. Again, workingre.com. Speaking of WorkingRE, we have back on the program the publisher of WorkingRE, good friend of mine, Mr. Isaac Peck. He, of course, is also the president of OREP Insurance, which is a leading provider of E&O insurance for more than 10,000 real estate appraisers across the United States. He received his master's degree in accounting from San Diego State University. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Isaac Peck. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Dustin. It's great to be back on the podcast with you.
You are looking dapper today, my friend. I need to get a jacket on or something and be as cool as you.
I'm trying to look more professional.
And you do, my friend, you do. Well,
Thank
welcome
you.
back. I wanted to have you on, Isaac. You always produce some great articles, of course. And I've followed WorkingRE for years and years, long before they were even a sponsor here. And I have encouraged listeners to make sure that they jump onto the free newsletter. They just have to put their email address in, and you put out some really great things. And recently, you came out with another great article on a topic that has been huge in the appraisal industry. A lot of talk online about this. The article, folks, is called The Great Debate on Appraisal Fees. So if you want to follow along in your books, I would encourage you to pull that up. The Great Debate on Appraisal Fees. Go to WorkingRE Magazine. Just type in Great Debate. It'll pull up if it's not already on the main page. Let's talk, Isaac. Why did you write this article? What was the thing that precipitated this particular article?
So I think in the appraiser profession, especially over the last few years, there's been a lot of pain in the appraiser space with fees getting driven down. Low. Not only are we experiencing a historic slowdown, there's less mortgage transaction volume now than there has been kind of inside of recorded history, at least
Mm.
inside of the last, 10, 15 years. But alongside that volume slowdown has been a massive downward fee pressure driven by AMCs, where AMCs have a additional leverage in the marketplace, and they're using that leverage to drastically reduce the fees that are being paid to appraisers.
Mm.
And so that's what I've heard at conferences. That's what we've heard from our own clients. We've heard that from our readers. And so it was very timely that the CFPB, at the late spring, early summer, put out basically a call request for information. They announced that they were looking at an inquiry into junk fees.
Mm.
Direct quote from them in terms of the fees that borrowers are being charged when they're closing on a mortgage, whether it's a purchase or a refinance. The borrowers are getting hit with a lot of different fees, fees for this, fees for that. And the CFPB announced that they were looking at that and issued a request for comment. And we saw nearly 100 comments coming in dealing with the appraisal fees and how that cost is being disclosed to the consumer. And one of the really important things here that I want to kind of call attention to is how that is disclosed to the consumer on the TRID disclosure, right?
Mm,
The consumer disclosure when the borrower receives their first kind of estimate in terms of what closing costs are going to be.
right.
And
I'm going to
they're
interrupt you
quoting,
for just
go
a
ahead.
second, if you don't mind. I don't want to derail you, but I just want to set the stage a little bit. You're referring to the CFPB. Want to make sure that reader or listeners understand what we're talking about. So this is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and this is not the request for information was not specific to appraisal fees, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
It was fees generally in terms of the being what's charged to the consumer in the mortgage closing cost process.
So there were a lot of comments, but you said there were nearly 100 comments that were specific to the appraisal fees. I have to
Yes.
admit, Isaac, the first I heard about this request for information was when you wrote about it, which was, of course, after the fact, right? After
Right.
that
Right.
solicitation had been closed. When you said there was nearly 100 comments submitted by appraisers, I was a little bit surprised by that, but not really because I hadn't heard about it. I sometimes see 100 comments about fees on a Facebook post, right? So it's unfortunate that a lot of appraisers didn't hear about this up front, but nonetheless, set that aside. We're after that. Okay, continue. Now that we have kind of set the stage, you were talking about to TRID a little bit.
Yeah, so when the consumer is when they receive their disclosure in terms of what the mortgage closing, the estimate of mortgage closing costs, they see a single, appraisal fee,
Mm,
right? And
right.
whether that's 800 or 900 or $1,300, right? And that leads the consumer to believe that the appraiser is being paid,
Hmm.
the $800 or $900, for example. And in reality, that fee is being split between the appraiser and the AMC in the vast majority of cases. And because of the slowdown in the mortgage market and the incredible leverage that a lot of AMCs have in the market right now, in some cases, let's say if there's an $800 appraisal fee, the AMC might be taking 550 of that and paying the appraiser 250 to do the
Hmm.
appraisal.
Hmm.
And so there's a misunderstanding, I think, or rather the lack of a full understanding, because I've heard from a number of appraisers, well, our state, allows the appraiser to include the invoice in their appraisal, in their appraisal, right? What the appraiser was actually paid, and the disclosure of what the appraiser was paid versus what the was disclosed to the consumer. And that's nice. Some states have laws that the appraiser is required to or allowed to include the invoice in their appraisal report. And that provides some level of transparency to consumers in terms
Hmm.
of they paid this much and the appraiser was only paid this much. But that's really not the crux of the matter that we're dealing with
Well,
here.
because the consumer's not even going to read that. I mean, let's be honest. Like they care. Like they're going to open it up and go, "Oh, that's interesting that the appraiser only got paid
Right,
X amount."
right. So we're talking about what's actually disclosed to the consumer upfront on the TRID
Hmm.
disclosures. And a number of people are calling to separate the appraisal fee and the AMC fee on the consumer disclosures, on the TRID disclosures.
Hmm.
So what if instead of the consumer seeing, appraisal fee and it being kind of obfuscated how much of that fee the AMC is keeping and then how much the appraiser is getting paid? What if two fees were disclosed on that TRID disclosure, an appraisal fee and an AMC fee? And a number of appraisers and appraisal organizations believe that separating those two fees removes a really inherent conflict of interest that exists for AMCs, right? Because if there's a single fee and the AMC gets to kind of shop for the cheapest provider of appraisal services and keep the difference,
Right.
uh, and that's an inherent conflict of interest that kind of cuts against their motivation to find the best appraiser for the job.
Hmm.
And it also really people argue that it hurts transparency in a really a deep way because the consumer doesn't understand, that the appraiser is only making a subset of that, um, and it's up, even the national. One of the things that was interesting about writing the story is a lot of the sister industries, right? Like the National Association of Realtors and the State Mortgage Bankers Association submitted their thoughts on this issue. And appraisers found a lot of friends.
Yep.
The National Association of Realtors came out and said that the bundling this fee on the TRID disclosure hurts market efficiencies, right? Which I think it's a nod to the free market, right? It that lack of transparency hurts free market competition in this space. And then we saw letters written by state mortgage banker associations, over a dozen of them, right, calling for the separation of this fee on the initial TRID disclosures. So it's a really interesting thing, I think, right? And we might be in a position where the CFPB is finally ready to take action on this.
Well, I hope so. And when we get back from the break, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how this might change things in the future, or if you, Isaac, believe that it will. I also want to, of course, talk about there was at least one group out there that was not so much a friend to appraisers that I want to make sure that we highlight. But first, I want to pause and remind you, of course, that we're sponsored by a couple of great companies. Folks, the article that we're talking about today, and so many great articles, are found, of course, in WorkingRE Magazine. Isaac Peck is the publisher of WorkingRE. And folks, if you're not signed up for their free newsletter, and when I say it's free, it's free. And I know some people are saying, well, I don't want to clog up my email. Folks, trust me, this is good stuff that you're going to want to read if you want to stay up in the industry. Isaac works very hard, and his team work very hard to make sure that you don't have to go out and search this information out. They keep us in the know. And it's well worth signing up. WorkingRE.com, and then sign up for their free newsletter. It'll just pop up as a pop-up screen when you go to their website. Just type your email address in there and sit back and enjoy. WorkingRE.com. Again, WorkingRE.com. Spark, folks. Yesterday I was speaking to one of my All-Star team members and talking about saving time and some efficiencies. And I said, "Are you using Spark?" And he goes, "I don't think it's in my area." And we went to the website together and looked it up, and sure enough, it was there. They are adding areas all the time. So if it's been a while and you think they're not in your area, maybe check them out. Folks, this will save you time on every single report, which of course saves you money. Check them out by going to spark4appraisers.com. That's Spark, F-O-R, appraisers.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. A good friend of mine, Mr. Isaac Peck, wrote a great article that everyone needs to read. I know this is a hot topic, Isaac. The article, of course, is called The Great Debate on Appraisal Fees. And appraisers need to read this because, well, let me ask you, Isaac, I don't want to make a prediction here. Is this going to go anywhere? What changes, if anything, with this recent CFPB issuing?
I mean, again, this is about a push to separate the appraisal fee and the AMC fee on the TRID disclosure. This is different than, the appraiser being able to include an invoice or disclose what they got paid in their appraisal fee. And this deals directly with the fact that, in the status quo, AMCs seem to have a financial incentive, right? There's one fee and they get to keep the difference between what they can find an appraiser to take the assignment for and what the consumer pays. And that's something, I mean, I've talked to the folks at the Appraisal Institute, right? The folks at AI, really hardworking lobbyists and people sticking up for appraisers have been trying to separate these fees for the last 8-9 years, almost a decade. Right when the TRID rules first came out in 7 or 8 years ago, there was a push to separate these fees then, and so this has been an ongoing struggle that folks have been working on, for the last 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, and I promised I wanted to focus on maybe unfortunately a little bit of negative out there. This is not going to come as a surprise to anybody in the industry that follows some of these groups. But our good friends, REVA, the Real Estate Valuation Advocacy Association, I think is what that stands for, wrote, I think you reported a 19 19-page letter attacking the Appraisal Institute, basically saying that separating these fees is unsubstantiated, their words, and charging that they provide no evidence to support consumer confusion or harm with respect to current disclosure practices. I mean, this isn't a surprise, right, Isaac?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm not surprised.
Right.
Reva's letter was basically like, we're not opposed to separating the fees, but then they spent a good deal of that kind of attacking the letter that
Right.
the Appraisal Institute and the ASA and the Association of Farm and Rural Appraisers wrote, urging the separation of the fee. And that's, I think, to be expected.
Right. Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, and I was happy to see that many groups, you mentioned a couple of them are already, a couple others. The CRN, Joan Trice, was quoting Durbin, my good friend Ernie Durbin, who wrote an article in 2016 regarding this. Folks, this has been an ongoing issue for a great deal of time. Again, Isaac, I'm going to pin you down a little bit. I know this isn't going to change everything. But what is your prediction on, does this move the needle at all? Do you see that TRID in the future is going to have this disclosure and start to separate these fees, or is this just another thing that happened that kind of goes by the wayside and we really don't see any change as appraisers?
I think there's a chance, Dustin.
Okay. So you're saying there's a chance?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I think that there's a chance that the CFPB, we know that the CFPB is looking at this issue closely, right? They're looking at the fees that are being charged to consumers. Appraisers are appealing to the director, Rohit Chopra, and pushing hard for this. So we know that the director of the CFPB is looking at this personally. I don't know, I don't know how likely it is that action is going to come down on this issue, but I think that there's a possibility we could see some real positive change here.
Well, I think you and I both agree that the free market only works with transparency. I think that's something you said in the article itself. And the more transparency that we can have, the better off we're going to be. Isaac Peck, as always, a pleasure to have you on, my friend. And thank you for writing this. Thank you for staying on top of these issues so that we don't have to work so hard. We can just rely on your hard work to come to us and report these. And by the way, if anybody wants to go deeper than what we've done here, I would highly encourage you to go back to the article, because one of the great things about the article is it has the references to the information directly. You can look up docket numbers and read articles that are quoted that we've talked about here, and others that are quoted inside the article itself. The article is called "The Great Debate on Appraisal Fees." Mr. Isaac Peck is the publisher and the writer of this particular article. Thank you, friend. I appreciate you being on. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Dustin.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.